Many of those who have spoken before me on these occasions have commended the author of that law which now wrote by having instituted an oration to the honor of those who sacrificed their lives in fighting for their country. For my part, I think it sufficient for men who have proved their virtue in action, by action, to be honored for it, by such as you see the public gratitude now performing about this funeral, and not the virtues of many ought not to be endangered by the management of any one person when their credit must vicariously depend on his oration, which may be good and may be bad. Difficult, indeed, it is to judiciously handle a subject where even probable truth will hardly gain assent. The hearer, enlightened by a long acquaintance and woman's affection, may quickly pronounce everything favorably expressed in respect to what he wishes and what he knows, while the stranger pronounces all exaggerated through envy of those deeds which he is conscious above his own achievement, for the praises bestowed upon others are then only to be endured. When men imagine they can do those feats they hear to have been done, they envy what they cannot equal, and immediately pronounce it false. Yet as this solemnity hath received its sanction from the authority of our ancestors, it is my duty also to obey the law and to endeavor to procure as far as I am able the goodwill and approbation of all my audience. I shall therefore begin first with our forefathers, since both justice and decency require we should on this occasion bestow upon them an honorable resemblance. In this country they kept themselves always firmly settled, and through their valor handed it down free to every generation. Worthy indeed of praise are they, and yet more worthy are our immediate forefathers, since enlarging our inheritance into the extensive empire which we now possess, they bequeath their work of toil to us, their sons. Yet even these successes we ourselves here present, who are yet in the strength and vigor of our days, have notably improved, and have made such provisions for our Athenians that now it is also in itself to answer every exigence of war and peace. I mean not here to recite those martial exploits by which those ends were accomplished, or the resolute defences we ourselves and our fathers have made against the formidable invasions of barbarians and Greeks. Your knowledge of these will excuse along the tale. But by what methods we have risen to this height of glory and power, by what polity and what conduct we are thus aggrandized, I shall first endeavor to show, and then proceed to the praise of the deceased. These, in my opinion, can be no impertinent topics on this occasion. The discussion of them must be beneficial to the numerous company of Athenians and of strangers. We are happy in a form of government which cannot envy the laws of our neighbor, for hath it served as a model to others, but original at Athens. In this our form, as committed not to the few, but to the whole body of the people, is called a democracy. How different soever in a private capacity, we shall all enjoy the same general equality our laws are fitted to preserve, and superior honors just as we excel. The public administration is not confined to a particular family, but attainable only by merit. Poverty is not a hindrance, since whoever is able to serve his country makes it an obstacle to preferment from his first obscurity. The officers of the state we go through without obstructions from one another, and live together in the mutual endearments of private life, without suspicions, not angry with another, following the bent of his own humor, not putting on the countenance of discontent which pains though it cannot punish, so that in private life we converse without diligence or damage, while we dare not, on any account, offend against the public, through the reverence we bear to the magistrates and the laws, chief to those enacted for redress of the injured, and to those unwritten, a breach of which is thought a disgrace. Our laws have further provided for the mind most frequent intermissions of care, by the appointment of public recreations and sacrifices throughout the year, elegantly performed with a particular pomp, the daily delight of which is a charm that puts melancholy to flight. The grandeur of this, Athenians, causes the produce of the whole earth to be imported here, by which is a familiar enjoyment, not more of the delicacies of our own growth than of those of other nations. In the affairs of war we excel those of our enemies, who adhere to methods opposite our own. For we lay open at Athens the general resort, nor ever drive any stranger from us whom either improvement or curiosity hath brought among us, lest any enemy should hurt us by seeing what is never concealed. We place not so great a confidence in the preparatives and artifices of war, as in the narrative warmth of our souls impelling us to action. In the point of education, the youth of some peoples are injured by a course of laborious exercise to support toil and exercise like men, but we, notwithstanding their easy and elegant way of life, face all the dangers of war as intrepidly as they. This may be proved by facts, since the Lacedaemonians never invade our territories, barely with our own, but with the united strength of all their confederates. When we invade the dominions of our neighbors, for the most part we conquer without difficulty in an enemy country those who fight in defense of our own habitations. The strength of our whole force no enemy hath yet ever experienced, because it is divided by our naval expeditions or engaged in the different quarters of our service by land. But if anyway they engage in defeat a small party of our forces, they mostly give it out a total defeat, and if they are beat, they were certainly overpowered by united strength. What thought from a state of inactivity, rather laborious exercise, or with a natural rather than acquired valor, we learn to encounter danger. This good, at least we receive from it, that we never droop under the oppression of possible misfortunes, and when we hazard the danger, are found no less courageous than those who are continually injured to it. In these respects, our whole community deserves justly to be admired, and in many we have yet to mention. In our manner of living, we show an elegance tempered with frugality, and we call it philosophy without enervating the mind. We display our wealth in the season of beneficence, and not in the vanity of discourse. A confession of poverty is disgrace to no man, nor for to avoid it is disgrace indeed. There is visible in the same person an attention to their own private concerns and those of the public. In those and others engaged in the labors of life, there is competent skill in the affairs of governments. For we are the only people who think him that does not meddle on the state affairs, yet not indolent, but good for nothing. And yet we pass the soundest judgments, and are quick at catching the right apprehensions of things, not thinking that words are prelusive to actions, but rather not being duly prepared by previous debate, before we are obliged to proceed to execution. Herein consists our distinguishing excellence, that in the hour of action we show the greatest courage, and yet debate beforehand the expediency of our measures. The courage of others is the result of ignorance, deliberation makes them cowards, and those undoubtedly must be owned to have the greatest souls, or most acutely sensible of the miseries of war, and the sweets of peace, and are not hence in the least deterred from facing danger. In the act of beneficence, further, we differ from the many. We preserve friends not by receiving, but by conferring obligations. For he who does a kindness hath the advantage over him who by the law of gratitude becomes indebted to his benefactor. The person obliged is compelled to act the more insipid part, conscientious that a return of kindness is merely a payment and not an obligation. And we alone is probably beneficent to others, not so much from interested motives as for the credit of pure liberality. I shall sum up what yet remains by only adding that our Athens in general is the school of Greece, and that every single Athenian among us is excellently formed by his personal qualification for all the various scenes of active life, acting with the most graceful demeanor and the most ready habit of dispatch. That I have not on this occasion used a pomp of words, but the truth of facts, the height to which by such conduct the state hath risen, is an undeniable proof. For when are we the only people of the world who are found by experience to be greater than report, the only people who, upon the attacks of an invading enemy, exempted the feet from the bluish of indignation, and to the tributaries yield no discontent, as if subject to men unworthy of command. That we deserve our power, we need no evidence to manifest. We have great and signal proofs of this, which entitle us to the admiration of the present and future ages. We want no homage to the herald of our praise, no poet to deck off history with the charms of verse. We dependent of exploits must suffer by a strict relation. Every sea hath been opened by our fleets, and every land hath penetrated by our armies, which have left behind them, everywhere behind them, eternal monuments of enmity and our friendship. In the just defense of such a state, these victims of their own valor, scorning their own threatened to it, have valiantly fought and bravely died. And every one of those who survive is ready, I am persuaded, to sacrifice life in such a cause. And for this reason I have enlarged so much on national points, to give the clearest proof that in the present war we have more at stake than men whose political energies are not so valuable, and to illustrate by actual evidence how great a condemnation is due them, who are now my subjects, the greatest part of which they have already received. For the encomiums with which I have celebrated the state have been earned for it by the bravery of these and men like these. And such compliments may be thought too high or too exaggerated if passed on any Greeks but them alone. The fatal period to which these gallant souls are now reduced is the surest evidence of their merit, an evidence begun in their lives and completed in their deaths. For it is a debt of justice to pay superior honors to men who have devoted their lives in fighting for their country, through interference to others in any virtue but that of valor. Their last service effaceth all former demerits. It extends to the public. Their private demeanors reached only a few. Yet not one of these was at all induced to shrink from danger, to fondness of those delights which the peaceful affluent life bestows. Not one was less lavish of his life, that the flowering hope attendant upon wants, that poverty at length may be exchanged for affluence. One passion there was in their minds which was stronger than these, the desire of vengeance on their enemies. Regarding this as the most honorable prize of dangers, they boldly rushed towards the mark to glut revenge, and then to satisfy those secondary passions. The uncertain event they had already secured in hope, what their eyes showed plainly must be done, they trusted their own valor to accomplish, thinking it more glorious to defend themselves and die in the attempt than to live. From the reproach of cowardice, indeed, they fled, but presented their bodies to the shock of battle, when insensible of fear, but triumphing in hope. In the doubtful tread instantly dropped, and thus discharged their duty which brave men owed their country. As for you, who now survive them, it is at best to pray for a better fate. But to think it your duty to also to preserve the same spirit and warmth of courage against your enemies, not doubting of the expediency of this far from a harangue, where anyone indulging a flow of words may tell you what you yourselves know as well as he, how many advantages are in fighting valiantly against your enemies, but rather making the daily increasing grandeur of this community the object of your thoughts, and are quite enamored by it. And when it really appears great to your apprehensions, think again that this grandeur was acquired by brave and valiant men, by men who knew their duty, and in the moments of action were sensible of shame, who, whenever their attempts were unsuccessful, thought it no dishonor for the country to stand in need of anything their valor could do for it, and still made it a most glorious present. Bestowing their lives on the public, they have everyone received the praise that will never decay. A sepulchre will always be more illustrious, not in that which their bones lie mouldering, but that in their frame is preserved, to be on every occasion, when honor is the employ of either word or act, eternally remembered, for the horror of the sepulchre of illustrious men. Nor is the inscription on the columns in their native land alone that shows their merit, but the memorial of them, better than all inscriptions in every foreign nation, reposited more durably in universal remembrance than on their own tombs. For this very moment, emulating these noble patterns, placing your happiness on liberty and liberty in valor, be prepared to encounter all the dangers of war. For to be lavish of life is not so noble. in those whom misfortunes have reduced to misery and despair, as in men who have the loss of an uncomfortable substance and enjoyment of all the blessings this world affords, by an unsuccessful enterprise. Adversity, after a series of ease and affluence, sinks deep into the heart of a man's spirit, and the stroke of death insensibly received in the vigor of life and hope. For this reason, the parents of those who are now gone, whoever of them may be attending here, I do not bewail. I shall rather comfort. It is well known to what unhappy accidents they were liable from the moment of birth, and that happiness belongs to men who are in the most glorious period of life, as these now have who are to you the source of sorrow. These whose life hath received ample measure, happiness and continence, and equally happy in its conclusion. I know in truth it is a difficult task to fix comfort in those breasts which will frequent remembrances, and seeing the happiness of others, of what they once themselves enjoyed. And sorrow flows not from the absence of those good things we have never yet experienced, but from the loss of those to which we have accustomed. They who are not yet by age past childbearing should be covered on top of having more. The child yet to be born will be a private benefit to some in causing them to forget such as they no longer are, and will be a double benefit to the country in preventing its desolation and providing for its security. For those persons who cannot, in common dress, be regarded as members of equal value to the public, who have no children to expose to danger for its safety, but you whose age is already far advanced, compute the greatest share of happiness, for your time hath afforded for so much gain, persuading yourselves the remainder of it will be short, and enlighten that space by the glory gained by these. It is greatness of soul alone that never grows old, nor is it wealth that delights in the later stage of life, as some give out to so much as honor. To you, the sons and brothers of the deceased, whatever number you hear, a fear of the party contention is supplied. For him who no longer is, every one is ready to commend, so that to whatever height you push or desert, you will scarce ever be thought to equal, but to be somewhat inferior to these. Envy will exert itself against the competitor while life remains. But when death stops the competition, affection will applaud without restraint. If after this be expected from me anything to you who are now reduced to a state of widowhood about female virtue, I shall express it all in one short admonition. It is your greatest glory not to be deficient in the virtue of peculiar to your sex, and to give men as little handle as possible to talk of your behavior, whether well or ill. I have now discharged the province allotted me by the laws, and settled at that most part of this assembly. Our departed friends have by facts already been honored. The children from this day till their manhood shall be educated at the public expense of the state, which hath appointed so beneficial a meed for these and all future relics of the public contests. For however the greatest rewards I prose to virtue, these are the best patriots are ever to be found. Now let everyone respectively indulge in becoming grief for his departed friends, and then retire.